shall set you free. Maybe not, though, unfortunately for George in this episode. The Truth was a solid episode. Not one of my favorites, I would say, but it was a solid episode. It had a couple different storylines that, of course, continues to, collide together, involving from different storylines in the episode. The main story here, of course, was George and his girlfriend, Patrice, who was a former accountant and former IRS... she's an accountant and former IRS auditor. And she also was interested in, crafts and whatnot. Well, George is on a date with her. And it was very obvious that George had nothing in common with this woman. I mean, heck, does George even have anything in common with anybody, to be honest? While he's at lunch with her, Jerry is back at his place, and he's going through his tax receipts because he is being audited for donating to a fraud fund, a fraud charity or whatnot, whatever it's called. Some volcano thing, I can't remember what exactly it was called. But apparently also, Jerry was too embarrassed to admit it to Elaine that was the fund because, one, Elaine didn't remember him ever, being the person to donate, but also she thinks that he only did that just to impress her when they first started going out with each other. And of course, Jerry is back at his apartment bragging about how George's girlfriend is going to be his hero to help him get out of this, who she did actually volunteer to help him out to, get him out of the trouble with the IRS. George, though, breaks it off with her because he told the truth, which is right to tell the truth. Unfortunately, it didn't work out so good. George, of course, comes back to the apartment when Jerry was just bragging about George and how great of a man he is, then finds out that George broke it off with Patrice. So then he was he remembered that they just took his tax papers as she had, and he's like, what about my tax papers? Even though George had broken it off, Jerry still cared about him getting out of this audit. So George calls the office, and they said that Patrice never came back from lunch. So he tries calling her at her home. She hangs up on him. So then the next day, George goes to her apartment, and Jerry coming back hoping that George gets the papers. Didn't happen because George gets there and finds out that he drove her to go to check into a mental institution. Of course, George would do something like that. He even mentions, which of course would foreshadow in the future, a future episode in season 4, he claims he drove a woman to lesbianism, but he never thought he'd ever drive someone to a mental institution. So him and Jerry decide, well, of course, more so because Jerry wanted those papers, to actually go see her and see if he can figure out, he can get a word on his papers. Even though without making it obvious they were there not for her feelings, but because Jerry wanted his papers and him to get out of this audit. So they went there, and of course after talking for a bit, Jerry without purposely going into that they were just there for the papers, Patrice figures out that, that Jerry's the one that she's supposed to be, helping out of that audit. And she goes, "Oh, I'm so willing to help you, but the problem was after I came out for lunch, I threw away your papers out of anger." She goes, "So I can still help you. You just have to bring me the copies." Jerry's like, "Who makes copies?" So then Jerry spends time trying to track down copies of his receipts that he needs, as the evidence for him to get out of this audit. And unfortunately, he went hunting them down. And did he ever find him? I don't know, but because obviously they didn't look like complete jerks, George basically said he took back everything he said, and him and Patrice started seeing each other again, even though we never heard from her ever again. Now, the other story going on in this one, the sub-story, was Kramer was dating Elaine's roommate, Tina, which was fine. He was getting in the way of a lot of things. She was not happy with what she was doing stuff with his apartment and whatnot. She just felt uncomfortable because also she never liked Tina to begin with. So then it comes to there's a problem when Kramer had accidentally seen Elaine naked. And Kramer's like, well, you want to see me naked? Which, of course, foreshadows to one of my favorite episodes in the future. I think it's in season 5, The Hamptons. We'll talk about that. I can't wait to talk about that one. That is one of my favorite episodes. More because of the inside looks, backstory about how the stories for that episode came about was just priceless. But, of course, that makes things awkward. And then Elaine comes back to her apartment the one day, and Kramer and Tina, I guess, are getting it on while dancing to some, African music or something like that, and he comes out with just wrapped in a towel, and then Elaine is like, can you just please put some clothes on? He's like, oh, I'm good. And then, of course, Tina comes out and says, Kramer, you're coming back to bed? And then they're like, is everything okay, Elaine? And she's like, what, something's wrong. Tell us the truth. And Elaine just says, I think you are a... she wanted to say she just hated the two of them together. Great couple. And just goes away. So then Tina and Kramer start getting it on again. But they got on the floor. They were trying to roll to the couch. The only problem was Kramer had just gotten a windshield that they were using as a coffee table. Which is also, of course, a foreshadow of Kramer's future coffee table book about coffee tables. What was even about coffee tables, but I probably don't even know Kramer would have even known all about that, even though the guy claims he was smart in some things, as he did say in the non-fat yogurt future episode he got a 90% in biology. I'm sure he was intelligent, but while him and Tina were on the floor getting it on, they crashed into the windshield and they got cut up, had to be taken to the hospital, and were injured, unfortunately. That's really it. That's really that episode. Like I said, solid episode. Not one of my favorites, but I didn't hate it. But it's just not one that I would go out of my way to watch over and over again. The Note was definitely one. The next one, The Dog, one I kind of forget about most of the time, but it is what it is. We'll talk about that one next, The Dog. So guys, what are your thoughts on the Truth episode? Please leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. And make sure as always to slap a like on the video, subscribe for more content to my channel, and follow me on Twitter at DemandAirboy93. Till then guys, I'm checking out. I'll see you all later. Have a good rest of your night. Peace out everybody.